Now it's time for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. And of course, our dear Dr. Constance will be taking that with us.
Indeed. Let's look at the stories that are shaping the agenda for you today.
Right.
Okay, let's begin with this day newspaper. Shall we put that up? There we have the lead story. Cardoso economy belongs to all reform. All reform games must be protected. And at Arawa House, Sanwo-Olu boasts Nigeria will root out poverty, insecurity, and other trials. To the window, to attract fresh investment in oil sector, NUPRC announces 2025 licensing round. Daily Trust, no going back on PDP. Convention, the party says here. Travelers spend hours on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and 2 killed as Katsina communities protest over bandit attacks. 48 hours to World Cup playoff, Super Eagles boycotting training. That could be disastrous.
Absolutely.
Why senators wanted to impeach Akpabio, according to this report, and stock market loses 4.6 trillion naira, highest in a decade. The Punch, House shuts down plenary amid tension over budget. That story on PDP crisis is here again as it deepens. Abuja court has halted the convention. Tinubu Governor Sultan Grace Editors Conference today. Only 44% of social benefits reach poor Nigerians, according to the World Bank. The Daily Independent, Nigerians' health at risk as toxic chemicals permeate food supply. Panic selling rocks Nigerian equities as CGT fears trigger 5% tumble. And anyone doubting genocide in Nigeria should go live in Plateau and Benue, according to Professor Balaji Akinyemi. And all set for editors' conference today here in Abuja. We're looking forward to that. Vanguard, Trump, diplomatic engagements yielding results according to the federal government. Tinubu's reforms winning North, Badaru, Anyim, Arawa think tank. Wike soldiers bicker over alleged land grabbing. In Abuja, we saw that report from our correspondent. We've approved duty-free importation for aircraft spare parts, according to the Minister of Aviation Development, Aerospace Development, Kayamo. That's an important one because you want prices to fall, right? Don't we? And then Anambra poll, Soludo deputy received certificates of return from INEC. PDP crisis, Lamido secures another court order stopping convention. No governor can complain of poor funding under Tinubu, according to Sanwo-Olu. Himself is also a governor of Lagos State. Leadership, 2025 oil licensing round opens December 1, upstream regulator. Capital gains tax, stock market loses 4.64 trillion naira in one day. Weekend naval officers in face-off over Abuja land, and political rivals Governor Yusuf Ganduje exchange pleasantries. New Telegraph, targeted killings with open channels of communication with Trump. FG. Again, that story on PDP. Japa, we've stopped 294 Nigerians from exiting, denied 332 migrant entry, according to NIS. FG, CBN Finance Ministry to drive a new phase of policy reforms. And there's a Amechi speaking here. He said that the cabal stopped Buhari from carrying out electoral reforms when he was president. Daily Sun, military will defend Nigeria's sovereignty, army chief. Under Tinubu, governors can't lament lack of funds, Sanwo-Olu. NNPCL Senate rift deepens as committee rejects 210 trillion naira expenditure claims. That's a lot of money. FG lists 1 trillion naira Mofi Real Estate Fund on Nigerian Stock Exchange. And terrorism charge, Kanu asks court to stop November 20 judgment. The Guardian, ambition legal battle stall PDP convention threaten 2027 prospects. FG may suspend planned CGT over market concerns. We also have that story on Wike and the naval officers face-off. Let's go to the international headlines. Daily Graphic, poor visibility caused crash. There was an August 6th helicopter incident in Ghana. Newspaper, fresh hope for WASPE women as Labour promises to look again at compensation. And the Citizen newspaper, hush up over criminal cops. South Africa still facing that challenge of corrupt police officers. The Guardian, number 10 on alert amid fears of challenge to leadership. That's the Labour Party. Sir Keir Starmer has been facing a lot of battles since he became Prime Minister. No respite for him. The Independent, defiant BBC boss, we must fight for our journalism. And you have Kate there. Kate leads tributes to fallen heroes on Armistice Day. Nice heart. We're moving on to metro.co.uk. £5 billion crypto queen jailed. She's a Chinese woman who has fleeced over 100,000 people, from her mansion in the UK with her laptop. Daily Mail, 1,000 jobs a day now lost under Reeves. Again, we have the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, under fire still concerning the loss of jobs, and this is in regard to her policies. The Daily Telegraph, France stopping even fewer small boats under Starmer deal. And then finally, let's see Daily Express, 4 million on benefits don't have to find a job. Ooh. Yes, that's part of the crisis they're facing in the UK and why people are saying we don't want to pay more tax. Let's return to this day newspaper and start with the lead story there. Cardoso economy belongs to all. Reform games must be protected. When you read this story, he was talking about all the reforms have been carried out under this government, and he says that in the Nigerian economy, nobody has a monopoly. That it is a big economy, big enough to accommodate all. And he said that the general attitude of "I am fine, others can sort themselves out" will not sustain growth. That we have to work together in order to push Nigeria forward. Any systematic weaknesses affects everyone. And he also talked about we must avoid indiscriminate interventions that yield little result. We cannot sit back and assume that someone else would fix it. Minister of State for Finance, Dr. Doris Uzoka-Anite, reviewed that the federal government was currently working to establish a unified national framework that will bring together monetary and fiscal instruments to drive structural transformation. It's also, Yolanda, I'd like us to focus on where the minister talked about, that there should not be indiscriminate interventions in policy matters. And I think one of the reasons why he was saying this was that under the previous President Muhammad Buhari, who is now late, we had a central bank that was not independent. So there was a lot of political interference and interventions in the central bank, and you could see that in the policies that Mr. Godwin Emefiele was making during that period, and it affected the country greatly. For instance, here the minister talked about the ways and means, through which they were, taking out so much money from the Nigerian economy, and that was bad for the country. And we saw how that brought the country almost to its knees, until we now have a new government that is trying to carry out those reforms in order to improve the country. So the bottom line is that he is saying that we should have an independent CBN, and so he's also implying that now things have changed completely, that the CBN is making policies that would affect the country positively. And he talked about this unified national framework that it says that will bring together monetary and fiscal instruments to drive structural transformation. So this transformation that has started definitely needs to continue, but not only continue, it has to be from one government to the other, because the problem is always that when one government ends, the other one
has their own
agenda completely.
Absolutely.
Without that continuity, you won't, see the kind of consistent progress that you need over a long period of time, to lift the country.
But how do you then bring in your own continuity, as you call it, when people always come with their own agenda at every point in time? The report that we took earlier, he was sounding very positive in saying that it's trying to strengthen the ongoing reforms and to curb inflation. But how? I think the everyday person is kind of drowned in all of this talk of policy, but we'd probably just need a real breakdown on what this means for the everyday person. Yes, it's always good to look at things in a positive light and say how policies can be changed to enhance life, to lower inflation. These are all key things that the everyday person wants to hear. But I don't think we're getting enough explanation on how this will be done.
Yeah, I mean, there are explanations. We have reporters that go out every week to share with us correspondences from the Ministry of Finance and other parts of other ministries and departments and agencies. Yes, they may not be sharing enough, but the most important thing for people is that they want to see the results.
That's true.
Less talk and more results. But again, I go back to what I said earlier, is that every government comes on board. 8 years is a very long time and can make a significant change in the lives of Nigerians and in a country. So if you do the right thing and you take the right steps, you take the right actions, eventually, if the next government believes and sees that they are working for Nigerians, they are not working for themselves, eventually that will begin to show in terms of the scale and magnitude of progress that you will be seeing. So let's take another story in this day. There we have the governor of Lagos State speaking, Mr. Sanwo-Olu, at Arewa House. He said Nigeria will root out poverty, insecurity, and other trials. Very positive note here. He advocated for unity among Nigerians to surmount the country's development issues. It was a lecture to mark the 65th independence anniversary of Nigeria, organized by Arewa think tank, stating that Nigerians must adopt a homegrown, local, and bottom-up approach in the actualization of state policing, local government autonomy, presidential legacy, infrastructure projects, and the rest of them. Two things that I want to touch on here: unity and homegrown solutions for Nigeria. We talk about unity all the time in Nigeria, but are we walking the talk? It's very easy to sit in air-conditioned offices and say Nigerians must be united. However, the task of nation building is not easy. It's complicated, but it's possible. It can be done. And you must be seen to be doing the right thing. You must be seen to be rallying people together. You must be seen not to be marginalizing a section of your country. You must be seen not to be discriminating against a section of your country. Do you understand what I'm saying? So these things are important. It's not enough to talk about unity.
No, it isn't enough to speak on unity. And it also touches on the story that we just spoke about before, about Cardoso. It's everybody's responsibility to make sure that we're talking about the how. How are all these things going to be done? They're not going to come up magically.
No.
And it's not the responsibility of just one person or one tier or the government or the judicial system. It's every single person, including, the everyday person such as you and myself. Just as you said as well, it's not enough to sit in an air-conditioned office and complain about what is lacking in the country. It is everybody's responsibility to play their part in building the nation.
And it's very good that you brought up that part about everybody having a responsibility in Nigeria, because often the case is that we point fingers at, you know, the leaders, whether it's the governor or it's the president. Most times the president, because we have a sort of centralized system, although on paper we're supposed to be practicing a federal system. So everything that happens or that goes wrong in Nigeria, fingers are pointed at the presidency. However, when you look at the daily lives of people at the small corner where they are, whether it's, you know, at the gate or in whatever office where they're operating, where they have powers, what are you doing in that small space? Because what happens is that whatever one does at that little corner translates to your action and behavior when you become a bigger person, or when you take on a bigger office. It doesn't change. So important, everyone has a responsibility. And to the fact when it says we need homegrown solutions, again, it's, you know, part of the issues we face, the fundamental structure of Nigeria. Are we waiting for people to tell us this is how you need to run your country? Or are we ready to be honest and say we fundamentally have a problem with the structure of Nigeria, such that no matter who gets into office, no matter who gets into power, it's like the system is designed for them to fail. Are we thinking about that and saying we must change this? If we don't, then what are we doing?
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a final story from this day newspaper. On the window, to attract fresh investment in oil sector, NUPRC announces 2025 licensing round. So again, this is about oil, and this definitely shows us that oil still has a big role to play in the revenue of the government and in the economy. It has a big chunk of space in our economy. And they also talked about in this story about investor confidence, the way that we're able to implement and strengthen the Petroleum Industry Act will determine whether we have investors that are interested in, you know, coming into Nigeria to stake in their money. All right, let's move to Daily Independent newspaper. There we have anybody doubting genocide in Nigeria should go and live in Plateau. This is former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, speaking here. He also mentioned Benue State. It says that we won't be, that the statement by President Trump should be disregarded. And what he means by that is that instead of focusing on the word genocide, and what he has said, that Nigerians should look at what is going on within our country. Nobody needs to tell us about that. So he explained that one of the reasons why there is that, you know, friction between Christians and Muslims is that Christians are being killed by Muslims, and Muslims are being killed by Muslims, not Christians. So in that sense, you know, people will feel as if they are being targeted. So even if you don't use the word genocide, people feel that they're being targeted and that they are being persecuted on the basis of religion, even if we know that these people are extremists. But they're also doing it in the name of religion, sometimes because they say Western education is sin. So we want to get rid of Western education in our part of the world. And you have also Christians living in those areas. So it stated that we should not adopt a legal approach to the definition of genocide. And that if you come to Lagos, for instance, and kill 1,000 people, you know, Lagos has a large population, over 2 million people. So that will not be so obvious. But when you go to the local area, to the rural areas, where there are fewer people, and kill 1,000 people, and consistently continue to kill people, then you have fewer people left, you know, so that becomes very obvious. And you say, okay, you could decide to label it something. So those were his words. Bottom line, you know, whether, you know, we agree on the term, there is mass slaughter going on, there are deprivations going on, and that should be stopped, according to Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. Your thought?
It's very interesting and refreshing when you have an expert speak on such issues, because an expert will often come and put data into perspective. Just as you have rightly spoken about the numbers in genocide and how he has disputed that, you know, people should not go by what the Geneva Conventions would say about genocide numbers. I think genocide should be looked at more from the perspective of how many people of the actual population are being killed.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to agree with. I don't know if it's in the Geneva Conventions, but at least it's still a very valid point. One thing I wanted to also point out that stood out for me from this report is that there are two separate issues at play. There is the genocide factor. That one cannot be denied. I think there's a general consensus on this, that there is definitely a very high number.
No, there's a disagreement about the word genocide. However, people agree that there is mass slaughter going on.
Right. I thought that the dispute was over whether it was religious or not. That is what I believe,
okay,
and
there's
found
that.
from that. Yes.
Okay.
From my perspective,
Yes.
I thought that the genocide factor, you cannot dispute it. We have report after report, day in, day out, speaking about how mass numbers of people are being killed across the nation, different states. But where the factor that is coming into negation here is over the religious part.
Right.
Because if it's being touted as, you know, a Christian genocide, what happens to the Muslims that are being killed as well?
So
their numbers are equally as large.
Yeah, so very good that you talked about this, because yesterday we had a guest on Arise Prime Time, Dr. Kabir Ahmed, who deals with statistics, and he was able to show us fantastic data about what's going on. So he shared, you know, within a time frame that they did their research, that over 100 churches have been, you know, destroyed or burnt in Nigeria during the period under review, and then about 75 mosques. And so he talks about the location. So most of these churches are in the northeast. So in the northeast part of Nigeria is predominantly Muslim.
Interesting point.
Yes, predominantly Muslim. So you have Christians there that are fewer in numbers. And so they would feel targeted. They would feel persecuted on the basis of their faith.
That makes sense.
In contrast, he says that the number of mosques that are being destroyed, and much of the attack on Muslims, he says, is in the northwest. So northwest is predominantly Muslim, so yes. Muslims and Muslims. You know, so he tried to say, you know, we have to work with this data to really see clearly what is going on. However, he also did conclude that no killing should be acceptable in Nigeria. And I think there's something else that, you know, we do. A lot of people sit down as pundits in the South, you know, talking and making punditry about what's going on. If you are the one living in those rural areas or in those cities, in that part of Nigeria where you are experiencing pain and agony every day, it is not right to diminish people's pain.
Absolutely.
And to wave it off.
Absolutely.
Because we are sitting here, you know, nicely and not directly affected. People are going through a lot in this country, and none of it is acceptable. And
sorry, I was just about to say, to piggyback on what you're saying, how many reports have we taken where entire families are wiped out?
Yes.
Mother, father, children. Cousins, grandfather, all in one swipe. I remember that Benway report was very, very touching, that we took some months back, because it was talking about how many families had lost everybody.
Generations.
One
generation,
night.
2 generations, 3 generations wiped out. You know, it cannot continue.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to, I'm looking at the time. Let's move to, let's go to New Telegraph. Yeah, let's go to New Telegraph newspaper. Wike clashes with naval officer over access to Abuja land, an altercation between the minister of the FCT and Nyesom Wike. We saw that report.
Oh my
and
goodness.
The naval officer. So the dispute here is that the ministry or the minister claims they do not have a document for that land, and they are developing it. You know, so if they have a document for that land, they should come forward with it. It's in Gaduwa district, and the officer that is involved is the Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Awal Gambo, and he gave his boys orders to go there and stop the minister and his team from coming, you know, into that land. Yolanda, watching this, it's like might is right. That's what it seems like, because you have the military there armed to the to the teeth, not allowing anyone to come in there. Might is right.
Might is right, indeed. I had to sit clenching my jaws for that 7 minutes of that report where we were watching how the minister was just, literally shouting down on this naval officer. So here, my point is this. You could have a credible point, but when you do not manage how you react in that time, it can diminish the entire situation.
Yeah.
Because now the minister's reaction has people criticizing the way that he was speaking. I mean, it's such a poor choice of words. Why would you call a naval officer a fool in public? Nobody would like to be called that, let alone in such a, a combative way. So I also think that the naval officer is to be commended for the way that he reacted.
Commended? Did
Absolutely.
you see the second part of the video where he also raised his voice? So the bottom line is that, are we a lawless country? There is a lot of land grabbing going on in Abuja. People have also accused the minister. They've also accused the minister of land grabbing. But the bottom line is, do we have a law? Are we a lawless country? Do we obey our laws? Is it by might or is it by law? Anyway,
but also, Dr. Constance, before you go,
Yes.
I think the biggest debate now is to actually hear from an expert on which law supersedes which one, which power is mightier in this instance.
What do you mean? The law is the law. A naval officer or whoever, even the president,
even under orders,
shouldn't be under the law. No, they should. Everybody is under the law, not above the law. If not, your constitution is a shred of paper that means nothing. Then how are you governed as a country? That means anybody and everybody can do anything and get away with it. We have to leave this.
No problem.
Let's go to the
we'll come back to it later.
Yeah, international. We have barely 1 minute.
Sure.
Daily Mail newspaper, if we can pull that up. Another day in Starmer's socialist paradise, screams this headline. 1,000 jobs a day now lost under risk. Chancellor blamed as unemployment rate spikes to 5%. This is being reported as a damning indictment of Labour's economic policies. And this comes as the number of people on benefits not required to work hit 4 million. So you're taxing people more and people on benefit, 4 million people cooling. Or they say chilling at home. Yes.
So here are the numbers.
Yes.
Unemployment rate surged to 5% in the third quarter of the year. That's 1,000 jobs a day. This is the highest level of job losses since COVID. We haven't seen this much since the pandemic. And also these job vacancies have increased in over 3 years. That's what the report was saying. Now, this is a very scary reality for the British because job requirements have also become more stringent.
Yes.
Now, before jobs were almost guaranteed when you finish schooling or an internship or anything like that, but now that's a thing of the past.
The times are changing.
Absolutely.
There's also poverty in the UK now. We've seen that before, the numbers that there is rising poverty not only in the UK, across Europe and even in the United States, in the developing world. Everyone is going through a lot.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Constance, for that interesting conversation.